Hi, and welcome to the Train Right podcast. Today's guest, we have Stephanie Howe. Stephanie Howe is a professional trail and ultra runner from San Rafael, California. Stephanie loves spending most of her day outdoors, preferably in the mountains, with her dog Soren. Stephanie is a new mom to baby Julian, born December of 2020. Julian is already learning to love the outdoors while visiting nearby trails, peaks, and beaches with his mom. You can see these photos on Instagram. Professionally, Stephanie has a Ph.D. in nutrition and exercise physiology and owns a nutrition business centered on healthy, sustainable nutrition for health and performance. Competitively, Stephanie has won races including Western States 100 and Lake Sonoma 50 and has podium finishes at many other competitive ultra races. Stephanie is passionate about the outdoors and protecting our earth. And she's an active member of Protect Our Winters, or POW, where she turns her love for the outdoors into policy. And so I know Stephanie because she's also a beloved teammate of mine. So thanks so much for being on here, Stephanie. It's such a pleasure to speak with you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're doing this over, remote. You're in California, I'm here in Colorado. So unfortunately we can't be in the same place. But yeah, I wanted to dedicate this episode to kind of a couple things. So you have a PhD in nutrition. And so that's actually I've recommended athletes to see you if they're having problems with that, or just want to learn more about performance and nutrition. But specifically, I also wanted to link this into your journey as becoming a professional athlete and also a mom.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, so there is. So I mean, we can kick it off. I guess. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your practice in nutrition and kind of how you've blended that into your career of ultra running, and then we can kind of go into how you use your knowledge to while you were pregnant and listening to your body's needs.
Yeah, nutrition is something that I've always been passionate about, and it's been a really cool thing for me to take my educational background and turn it into application and actually help athletes to eat better for whatever their goals are. And that might mean performance, it might mean weight loss,
Mhm.
and it might mean just learning how to eat healthy for a sustainable lifestyle. And I love the challenge of learning like a new person, new goals, and figuring out how to best have them eat to reach those goals. So
Mhm.
for me, my background is nutrition and exercise science, and I'm really focused on sports nutrition. And that is more than just what you eat during the run. It's also what you have, surrounding training and what you eat day to day to help support recovery and performance. And it's really cool for me to be able to kind of bring my perspective from being in school for however many years, like 15, and then the practical experience from me also being an athlete and someone who likes to eat and cook and do all those sorts of things. So when I work with clients, a lot of them are athletes, not all of them. It's really about, okay, there's not like a cookie cutter, like, okay, this is how we prescribe your nutrition. It's really learning about the individual and talking about food and
Mhm.
not talking about numbers, because one of the most important things to me is to help establish a better relationship with food, because I think when you're connected to what you're eating, it's a much more enjoyable experience and it makes
Mhm.
for a better just body image and relationship with food.
Yeah, I mean, I love how you describe that because I think it's so important in the world of sport. Oftentimes, I think people, especially athletes, from a performance-driven standpoint, they can develop these unhealthy relationships, or think of food in this kind of mathematical way. But there's also just there is that, but there is also another aspect to food that's very communal, and understanding why you need to eat these types of foods. And yeah, and I love it too because it's obviously it's very individualized. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Because I think, there's not one, I think, diets or this is and full nutrition plan. It actually it it's not so cookie cutter for everyone, right? There's
Right.
quite a variety. And I think it's pretty polarizing when people start to talk about that.
Yeah. Nutrition is definitely not a one size fits all. And I like to think of it as more of an art. So
Mm-hmm.
you have the science that grounds you, but in application, you have to treat it as sort of a an art form because as you just alluded to, everyone is different. And there isn't like a specific combination of foods that's going to make for great performance or for just feeling healthy. It really depends on the person. And so what I like to do is kind of give guidelines as to, okay, so what foods fall into these categories? Like what foods are carbohydrates? What foods are proteins? What foods have fats in them? And
Mm-hmm.
then within those big ranges, you find the foods that make you feel best. So that's going to look different for everyone. And of course, you need to get the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, but they can be found in a lot of different foods. So it's not so much as like, a lot of people ask what I'm eating, and then they try to mimic that. And it's like, that's not what it's about. You can eat what I eat, but that might not be best for you. You might feel a
Right.
lot better eating like eggs for breakfast, whereas I'm going to eat a croissant with like some yogurt or something. And those are just random examples, but it is really individualized. And within the person too, it can change throughout the season or the training phase that they're in. And so that's why I try to stay away from like really solid numbers because
Mm-hmm.
the body is so complex. And although you might need X amount of calories in the summer, in the winter, you might need something different. And it's better to
Yeah.
just think about eating in terms of the food and pay attention to fullness and appetite cues. And that gets really muddled because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of individuals have been trained to override those cues. So if you overeat or undereat, it's really hard to trust your body's intuition. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a process of like getting back to that and trying to, assess how hungry you are and when you feel full and all of that. So there's so much
Mm-hmm.
that goes into it,
Mm-hmm.
besides
Yeah.
just prescribing the right number of carbohydrates for performance or the right amount of protein. There's all of the different layers of what
Right.
foods compromise that, and then how do we know how much? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's fascinating though.
Oh man, I love this. It's actually it's dear to my heart because my father he's a food science human nutritionist, but more of a biochemist. So he comes at it from like the researching kind of how, primarily lipids kind of, interact in the body. Anyways, I love this kind of stuff, but I digress. The actually I have a follow-up question for you because this is kind of pertinent into the meat of the conversation I want to get into. So
Mhm.
you recently had a baby. This was your first baby, baby boy Julian. Oh, he's so cute. So if you want to see on Stephanie's Instagram, you can definitely see some of the photos there. And also for the nutrition piece that we're talking about, um, uh, I'll post in the show notes of this a podcast where you can find kind of links to resources if you need to contact Stephanie for coaching or nutrition advice. But how did your relationship with, I mean, kind of you're speaking about that intuition. Were you able to trust that when you were pregnant? Because I feel, at least I've heard, I mean, I've never had a baby, but I've heard that there's these weird cravings or there's these weird, I don't know, just these things that your body is telling you of certain foods to eat. Did you experience that? And kind of just tell us about maybe if there are big changes in what you felt like your body needed when you were going through pregnancy.
Yeah, there were big changes for sure. I
Big
will
question.
acknowledge that pregnancy is a weird time, and
Right.
every woman is different, and even the same woman can have different experiences, like in subsequent pregnancies. So
Mhm.
the first thing for me was that I have a really good relationship with food, and I eat when I'm hungry, I stop when I'm full, etc. So I'm not restrictive, and I think that was a good place to be going into pregnancy because it just allowed me to just not feel these rigid, I guess, rules around eating. And
Mhm.
that was so helpful for the first 3 months because yeah, you feel nauseous, you don't feel like eating, and it's such a weird time for trying to fuel your body because you
Right.
need to eat. But for me, I didn't eat any vegetables for the first 3 months. And that is sort of typical to just feel, like nauseous and not be able to eat a lot of different foods. So I ate a lot of like chips were my favorite thing, like a lot of chips, toast. That was like the first thing I had to eat in the morning, which is plain toast, a lot of saltines, French fries. And that's kind of it. The other things I ate were forced, and I would try to eat a little bit of fruit every day, but I have a sweet tooth just in general, and sweets were like the worst thing. I couldn't even like, look at ice cream or chocolate. So, my advice from what I experienced and from talking with other moms is that those first 3 months, you just have to eat foods that sound okay. Don't
Mm,
worry about getting in, a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains. Just eat things that you can tolerate, because it's much more important to get in just some energy than to worry about what it is. And as things evolve, I started to feel better in the second trimester. Like once you hit the second trimester, life gets a lot better. And during
right.
that point, I was able to start eating normally again, and, having some vegetables, having fruit, enjoying ice cream again. And I didn't find that it was, I'm not sure I believe in cravings in the
Mm,
sense that we think of like, oh, I just want ice cream. I'm craving ice cream. It's like, well, your body probably is craving more energy, and that's a form that
mm,
you really like.
right.
I think aversions when you're pregnant are more common, of like something doesn't sound good. But in terms of cravings, I just think, you're needing more energy. So we tend to crave things that are more energy dense. And I use the word
Mhm,
energy rather than calories because I think it's a more positive word association.
mhm,
So energy dense just means things that have generally more calories in them.
mhm,
And I did trust my body because I know that I have that good relationship. Now, for someone who struggles with that a little bit, I think it is important to talk to someone or just be aware of what you're eating, because you do need to get certain things when you're pregnant. You need to get enough protein, you need to get enough fat, and and carbohydrate. You need all of them. But I think it's just some people are more, they feel more comfortable with certain foods or certain food groups, but it's important to get the whole spectrum. So the other misconception is that you need to just eat a ton when you're pregnant.
right.
And although you do need to eat more, it's not significantly more. So, I didn't think of it as like, oh, I just need to like eat extra meals. It was just I ate when I was hungry. And I think
Mhm,
when women approach it, pregnant women approach it from that perspective, it creates a better, like your body just responds better. And then
mhm,
post pregnancy, it's much easier to feel like yourself again.
right. And I mean, I love that because it's such an individual experience. I mean, and I mean, this ironically when you were saying something about that first trimester, you're kind of just eating what you want. It sounds like a little bit about like an ultra marathon when people are,
You know what I want when I'm in an ultra is chips.
I
Yes.
know.
It's very similar. When you think about when you feel your most nauseous, that's kind of what a lot of the day was like.
Yeah. So maybe this helped you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I knew what I could eat when I didn't feel good. It
Right.
was like a long time to be feeling like that. And I
Mhm.
like all the doctors and people are just like, oh, after 12 weeks, you're gonna feel great. But 12 weeks is kind of a long time.
That is a long time. That is definitely a long time to feel very bad. And so, can you describe in addition to your nutrition, I think that's a really good kind of sum up of your relationship with food and kind of your intuition throughout pregnancy. I think that's a really good example to live by. But what was your relationship with sport? Because I mean, you are an elite athlete. You know, you have run like it's not recreationally running what you do. So it's at a high level. You train, you race, long distances. So yeah, when you were pregnant, can you kind of describe what that was like and your relationship with running or specifically endurance.
Yeah, this is a great topic to talk about. We could talk all day,
Yeah.
because it's kind of this thing where women feel like they have to choose. Do you want to be an athlete or do you want to be a mom? Do you want to have a family? Do you want to have a career? And I
Right.
just don't see it like that. And for whatever reason, I mean, good or bad, I've just never thought that I had to choose. I just thought when this becomes something I want to do in my life, then priorities are going to shift and it's just going to happen kind of not seamlessly, but I'm just going to figure it out as I go. And I'm really glad for having that perspective because it's a stressful thing to decide to have a child. And especially
Mhm.
when your body is kind of an important piece of what you do. Because I mean, there's literally, a year that you can't really use it because 9 months, yeah, you can be active, but it's not like you're racing and training. And then after you give birth, it can be a long time before you get back to regular, running and training and racing. And so I think you have to know that those two aspects of yourself can coincide with each other. You don't have to
Mhm.
just be a mom and you don't have to, be an athlete and be afraid to go through this experience. So for me, when I found out I was pregnant, my first priority was taking care of myself and
Mhm.
making sure that I didn't overdo it with training
Mhm.
because I'm growing a human. And to be
Right.
honest, that wasn't hard because I didn't feel great. And
Yeah.
so, I got out the door most days, that was good. And then as I started to feel better, I think the second trimester was when it was like, okay, you just need to make sure that you always have water with you or you always have snacks. Just like, the little things that when you're not pregnant, they don't really matter. Like if you bonk, fine. But when you're pregnant and you bonk, that's kind of a bigger deal because it just hits you so much harder. So I kind of just changed my mentality of like, training in a selfish manner, and it was more about enjoying movement. Um, I think the decision was in talking to other athletes, like the hardest thing because you don't want to give up your sense of self as an athlete. But I think when we look at ultra running or a lot of endurance sports, they do they are a mature sport. And so it's not like you have this small number of years in your 20s or early 30s where you are in your prime, especially ultra running. You can perform at a high level as you're older. And when you're in it for the long game, it's really easy to wrap your head around like, okay, so this is a not a super short period of time, but like a chunk of time where I'm putting my priorities, I'm shifting them a little bit. I'm still an athlete and I'm still, a trail runner, ultra runner. It's like a big part of my identity. But right now, the bigger piece or the priority is like, I'm a mom and,
Mhm.
I'm taking care of this little human who just depends on me for everything. And it's really the most amazing thing. And I know that that athlete identity is still there. It's just like a little bit kind of how it is in the off season. Like, I'm just like maintaining it, but it's a lower priority. And I don't think it'll ever be like my main priority again. But it'll be like a much bigger part of my life. They can go
Right.
together.
Yeah. And so how did you have any kind of confidants that you spoke to help, kind of make this decision, or was it more of like an internal grappling? I feel like it's good to have people to talk to, other athletes in the sport. I mean, there's certainly athletes on our North Face team who have, still remain elite level athletes um, through motherhood. But yeah, was there anyone helping you with that decision?
Not really.
Yeah.
I didn't really plan my pregnancy, in a good way. Like I knew
Yeah.
I didn't want to get to the point where I was like approaching 40 and then starting to try and have it take a long time or
Mhm.
not happen at all because that is common. You can't really plan it that well. And some people struggle for years. So I just was like, okay, I'm not going to not plan or I'm not going to not try. Just see what happens. And I did get pregnant relatively quickly. So
Mhm.
I didn't really talk to too many people about it, but before the fact. But
Mhm.
after I did talk with a few friends. And it was hard because I didn't tell anyone really until it was 25 weeks, which is about 5 months. So I
Mhm.
was very far along at that point.
Mhm.
Just because I didn't know, I didn't want to, you never know what's going to happen early on.
Yes.
So I think I wish that I had more people or there was more information out there. Um,
Mhm.
because there really isn't. And I know Alicia Vargo, she's someone who's been,
Right.
pretty vocal about it, and Anna Frost,
Mhm.
and Emily Forsberg. But
Mhm.
besides those three women who I talked with a little bit, there's not that much. So
Mhm.
I'm hoping that this conversation we're having will be helpful for people. And I'm open to talk to anyone about my experience because it was pretty amazing and I learned a lot.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's just not that many women who have gone through pregnancy, had a child, and then competed at an elite level following, um,
Right.
for whatever reason.
Mhm. And it is, there's a big balancing act too. And so yeah, what is the information that you hope that can be out there for women? I mean, I immediately think of, some of these movements that are happening now, for instance, with Trail Sisters, this basically there's a Trail Sisters approved races that include, having women being able to kind of start equally at the front with the rest of the group. It allows for, um, you know, basically pads and tampons to be available at aid stations. It also allows for deferral for pregnancy. And then also things like, a woman's race specific t-shirt. So there's these different things that it's trying to get more women feeling like they belong in this world of trail running. And I think a huge part of that is pregnancy and motherhood, and having examples of, leading women in the sport like you, like Emily, like Anna Frost, like Alicia Vargo, doing this thing and still being able to compete at something that they were good at before, and they can still be good at afterwards. It's just a matter of, placing, having these women as examples.
Yeah.
And yeah, what other resources would you hope that would be, available, or just having the conversation, not be taboo? I think it's actually quite recently that there is, some addendums put into contracts of elite level athletes where pregnancy wasn't considered an injury.
Right. That is a big one. And
Yeah.
that's something that I think is, we can thank Nike for that, or
Yeah.
how bad they were treating their female athletes and how that was brought to light. And now other companies have realized, like, okay, we should have something set up. So having a pregnancy clause in a contract, or feeling comfortable talking to your sponsors about, like, hey, I'm pregnant, and not having the pressure of, like,
Mhm.
having to come back and perform. And I think that's becoming a more open conversation. And just, I think it's in the limelight right now. And so sponsors, and companies supporting women are starting to really think about that and how they can set the woman up, not just for the time that they're pregnant, but then post pregnancy, like to return to running. So I can say that the sponsors that I work with have been fantastic, and I think
Mhm.
that's something like, um any woman who starts as a sponsored athlete should definitely have that conversation, even if they're not in the place where they think they're going to be pregnant, but just, like, make sure that there is something set up so you can have that conversation. I
Mhm.
think that's really an important step, a big step in the right
Right.
direction.
And so were these part of your fears of maybe, like when, I know you said you didn't really necessarily plan, you just, kind of tried. But was this part of your, like, a fear of maybe, trying to have a baby, of figuring out timing in the middle of your athletic career? Because like you mentioned, ultra runners, I mean, we can peak. I mean, I think of, a runner like Darcy Picu, who's, 44, and she's crushing it at these ultra races, and she's not slowing down anytime soon. And she had a baby, early on in her athletic career. But, uh, how old, I mean, it depends, like the age, that you have a baby. I mean, then there's certain risks there too, as far as like returning to sport. I think maybe Anna Frost, she was maybe mid 30s, I think, when she had her when she had her little girl. Um, and yeah, that's something to consider too. Was that kind of part of the not hesitance, but your decision making?
Yeah, I mean, you never know. There's so much unknown. So it's like, you just kind of, when you make that decision, or, you find out like that decision has been made for you, there's a lot that you have to think through. And one of the most important things, I think, is patience. And like everyone, not everyone, but a lot of times you read about, okay, so after pregnancy, how do I get my body back or get that fitness back? And what
Mhm.
I think is important for women to remember is that you don't get your body back. It's like you've got a new body now. And it's like, what can you do with this body? And it's amazing. It's different, but it's not something that you're trying to just like revert back to your old self. And so patience and knowing that you're in uncharted territory, because there's a lot of people who heal quickly and are able to get back to, running or biking or whatever. And then there's sometimes like things that happen that prevent you from getting back to things as you would like. And it's
Mhm.
not a linear process. It's such a crazy, just like, okay, my body today feels great, but tomorrow it might not let me do much. And no,
Mhm.
like having that just understanding of like, okay, I'm not, I can't just respond to training necessarily how I used to. And I'm speaking
Right.
from this in an early on state. It's going to change as you progress from, the time away from birth.
Mhm.
But just knowing and having that understanding that you have to be patient with your body. And I'm getting a little bit off track here, but I think this is an important piece as well. And
Yes.
not trying to just, get out there and like crush training, because your baby is only little for so long and they change
Mhm.
so quickly. And
Mhm.
I don't know, I just want to be there for that. And there's so much time to get back out there afterwards. So I think that patience is like the key word that I'm getting at here. And just having a sponsor that supports that and doesn't,
Mhm.
you don't feel that pressure to get back out. And from a sponsor standpoint, and just from an identity standpoint, like
Mhm.
prove myself. Those are definitely like common things that I've heard. And I'm glad that my mindset is a little bit different, and I just don't, feel that of like, okay, I need to get back to being Stephanie the athlete. I'm like, no, I still am. It's just that I am caring for a baby right now, and that's amazing. And I'm not really worried about, competing. I know I will. It's just like when the time is right, it'll happen. And hopefully the time will be right at the end of August. We'll see. COVID will be right at the end of August. But you just never know.
Mhm. And so, I mean, this relates to my question too. I mean, have your goals changed? I think you answered that a little bit. Um, but I mean, yeah, I think again, it's kind of circling back to one of these first topics that we talked about is that I think women a lot of times they think that there's a choice. It's either or. But I think the majority of the storylines, at least of, women that I look up to the most, it's a story of
Right.
and I think that that's really important to highlight those kinds of things. And I mean, you've also mentioned your partner. I mean, in conversations that we've had together, Jorge. Like it's a team effort too. I mean, it's working together and knowing that okay, if you have these serious goals, well then you're going to work together as a team to kind of accomplish them. But it also starts with you saying like, no, I want to do this as well, and this is also important to me. This is also part of my identity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, having a supportive partner is key. And I think, we communicate really well, and we've been on the same page of like, okay, well, our family comes first, and like taking care of our baby is like,
Hmm.
the most important thing. But we both have goals, and they're ambitious goals. And I think this just takes, I don't want to say like makes them less important, but it just kind of takes the intensity of like the goal down a little bit, because it, even though we both want to be competitive trail runners, and to be honest, like he's hoping to run Western States this year, I'm hoping to run UTMB this year, and those
Hmm.
are huge races.
Yeah.
I think both of us are also like, we are gonna not selfishly prioritize our training like maybe we have in the past. And I'm more speaking for
Mhm.
myself, where it's like my day is scheduled around, okay, when am I going to go for a run? And then everything
Mhm.
else follows up. Right now, it's like, okay, between feedings and when he's not busy, when can I get squeeze out a run? And I
Mhm.
think that just takes that like stressful level of preparing for a race. It just kind of brings it down a little bit. And in a way, it makes it more enjoyable because it's like I can still accomplish this goal, yet I'm not stressing about like the little things like maybe I would have. Like,
Mhm.
say I only have an hour and I wanted to do a 2 hour run. It's like, well, whatever. I'm going to be back and be with Julian. And that kind of, makes me really happy. Whereas in the past, if I had work calls or something, I'd be like, oh, shoot, I missed that extra hour today. But I don't
Mhm.
really feel that anymore. And so it's different, but I think you can still accomplish big goals without feeling like you're sacrificing your family.
Yeah, and I love that it's all about balance, and I think it's you can kind of, it's time efficiency too. It's like, okay, you take what you get, and then if you have a big window, well, then all right, let's do it then. And it's actually kind of, yeah, I think it would be kind of nice because it's like more of a surprise with training. Some of the moms that I know here, they're like, well, I have a 3-hour window. I guess I'm going for a 3-hour run today. It's like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, you gotta take the time that you get, and I I
Yeah.
I don't wanna mislead people in painting, like, a really rosy picture of, like, "Oh, we're doing so great," and, like, blah, 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 like, it's hard.
Mhm.
Every day is hard, and, like, we we're both sleep deprived at certain times and can snap, and, like, there's days where I don't get to do what I want, and I'm frustrated.
Mhm.
But it's all just about, like, taking it back to, like, okay, like, this isn't he's not gonna be an infant forever. We're gonna figure out a schedule and a routine, and so just
Mhm.
kind of, like, knowing that in the back of my mind of, like, I'm gonna be able to get back to doing more I'm gonna get more free time on my own as he gets older. That's really helpful because it is tough day to day, and I originally was psyched that, I was pregnant during this time when COVID is so prevalent because there's no
Mhm.
races.
Right.
Hindsight, it was a terrible time to be pregnant because you're so isolated.
Yeah.
And even right now, we're just being really careful because Julian was a preemie, not by a
Mhm.
lot, but he's just a little bit more risk. So we're just being careful. Like I don't leave the house except for to go outside and run or ride my bike. But I hadn't seen another human besides Jorge in like forever. And
Yeah.
it was such an isolating time to be alone. So
Right.
I think human connection, especially when you are tired and you don't feel like yourself and like you just need to make that happen. So
Mhm.
right now I have a goal of once a week to get out and meet a friend. And I ride my bike with Kim Gaylord a lot. She's
Yeah.
another Bay Area local, and it's just been so good to connect with people.
Yeah. And this speaks to this whole kind of bigger thing we were talking about is community. And I think, your story and the example that you're providing to the community of trail running, ultra running, and just athletics in general, of being a mom and still, maintaining your identity as an endurance runner and, returning to sport at a high level. You know, that brings about community. And I feel like right now, of course, we're isolated a little bit more. Hopefully, it'll get back to normal a little bit. But still, it's like there's definitely connection and community within that, and it's kind of finding the voices and the people that you can be honest with, have these honest conversations, and the people that will be honest with you. I think that's one of the most important things, and I think in the ultra running community in general.
Yeah, and a lot of those connections right now are virtual, and even though that's not ideal, they're still really important, and you
Yeah.
gotta find those people that you connect with, and, there's different people that are gonna fulfill different circles or different needs in your world,
Mm,
and that might be your running friends, and it might
mhm.
be, your your mom friends or whatever it is.
Yeah,
You need to find those people that are going to be supportive and that
mhm,
are going you can connect with. I think that's the
right.
key because yeah, when you are alone, and we're all kind of alone right now,
Yeah.
you can't, you can hibernate for however long, but at some point it's like you need to have that social interaction. And I mean, ultra running is great because there are so many different people, different
Mhm.
goals, different lifestyles, um, you
Mhm.
know, age ranges all over the board. And so there
Yeah.
are, usually people that you can connect within that community.
Right. And yeah, it's just that support system that they'll support you in those, big, hairy, audacious goals. uh,
Yeah.
yeah, whether that's, being a mom in the middle of your professional athletic career or, doing UTMB or Western States as a new mom. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, so I mean, before I ask a final question, I did want to ask so Julian was born in December, so you're, a couple months into, returning back to running. How has that been? It's
Yeah.
kind of just another story of remaining patient, but
No, this is something I wanted to talk about because when people have asked me, how's it been as a new mom? How was it when you were pregnant? I've honestly said it was easier than I thought, and that it's still been true. And I think it's because I had zero expectations on my body. Like,
Mhm.
I wasn't like making a training plan or a nutrition plan or sleep plan. Like, I want to do 6 runs a week. I just literally removed all of those expectations and just, kind of let things happen as they did. And because of that, I think I just didn't have pressure on myself, and it went a lot better than how I could have anticipated it. In
Mhm.
post pregnancy, I think patience is key again, and not starting too soon and not holding yourself to that. I need to get fit. I need to get my body back, because you will in time. You'll get fit. I mean, you never, I don't think, get your body back
Mm.
in the old sense, but it is a unique process of getting back to, mobility. I underestimated the birth process, and I won't
Mm.
go into too much detail here. If anyone wants the details, I'm happy to talk about it. Um, but I didn't realize like how um traumatic it is on your body. And I had
Mhm.
a vaginal birth, and the
Mhm.
C-section is a little bit different. But walking after that was
Yeah.
painful, and I just had no idea. I don't know what I was thinking, but I just didn't know that there was all that trauma. And
Right.
so, I think I went for my first walk, like, around the block, like a week later, and that was hard. And so,
Mhm.
I kind of just removed all expectations of, oh, I want to start running at this time. And I didn't know when that was going to be. So I just kind of gradually started hiking when I could. And the first run I did was like at a month after. And it was like 2 miles, and it was like 11:30 pace. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And it's just like such a weird thing when you're used to having like a 10-mile run at like a much faster pace be kind of
Mhm.
effortless, and then to just have your body feel like crap after doing like something super slow and like not very far at all. And just
Mhm.
again removing that expectation of like, I want to just resume where I used to be. So I'm exactly 2 months, as of yesterday. So
Mm.
Julie just turned 2 months old. And I would say I've made a lot of progress, but there's still a long ways to go.
Mhm.
And it's, in being patient with myself. And some days are a lot easier than others. Like, I went for a run a couple days ago, and I just like can't run faster than like a 9-minute mile right now. I can a little bit if it's downhill, but to me
Yeah.
that's like kind of frustrating. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
But then I just have to remember context of like, okay, you just had a baby not that long ago. Like, you're breastfeeding, that takes a lot of energy, etc. And just be happy that you're out moving. So, um, yeah, every day is different. I fell actually on a run a couple weeks
Ah.
ago.
Oh no.
It was stupid. It's going down a really steep hill covered in leaves, and I just fell on my butt. And because your hips are hypermobile, it just like jacked my SI joint up. And
Oh,
I couldn't walk for like 10 days. Like I was just limping around the house and just like, okay, you just have to be patient. This will heal. And it did. And I ran a couple days ago and it was okay. But it's just little things like that. You just have to like have even more patience for, because it's like your
right.
body's still healing and recovering. And for some women, I think some forms of activity come back a lot quicker than others. And so just being open to that too, like, although running is kind of hard right now, I can ride my bike pretty hard. Like I have a trainer, and I ride outside, and that feels a lot better for my body than running does. So I'm doing a little more of that. And, for another runner, it might be swimming, or maybe running feels better. So you just
Yeah.
kind of have to play around with it. And just having zero expectations, I think, allows that freedom to experiment a little bit and not just feel like frustrated because it's hard.
Yeah, and this is kind of just with the whole theme. I mean, it's different for everyone. And I think it's inspiring that you're sharing your story with how real it is, because I feel like, for some women it's completely different, and for some women it's even harder than what you're describing, but there's a range of it, and I think that it's just a good, you just have to be patient, and your body knows what to do. It's like, it will heal time, if you keep on working something that you love, it can and will get better. But yeah, I mean, I think it's super inspiring, and the fact that, of course, you're stubborn and determined, and you're not going to give up.
Yeah, I'm not going to give up, and I'm giving myself a little more grace right now
Yes.
because,
I mean,
yeah,
that's a good lesson for anyone.
yeah,
And
rest is key.
yes, that too, probably. Um,
Mhm.
but so the final question I have for you, so I mean, you're a coach, so again, Stephanie's a coach of CTS, so yeah, I encourage you to reach out to her if you're in need of a coach, or separately for her advice on nutrition. But what is your advice for moms or moms to be to balance running and motherhood?
Yeah, I think first of all, remember that you can have both identities. You don't have to choose one or the other. You don't have to be a mom or be a runner, or you can kind of substitute career for that, or whatever your goal is. I think they can go together really well. You just have to know that your priorities are going to shift. So that's the first thing. And then the second, I just think let go of the expectations of needing to do whatever it is, because some days you feel great and some days you can barely get out of bed. And I think when you just accept that and like, okay, well, today is one of those days, and you just let your body get what it needs. And normally that's rest. As athletes, we're really good at pushing ourselves, but rest is super important. And, even though it might feel like you're doing a little bit more of that, you're also growing and caring for a human. So it's, that's a lot on its own. So I think letting go of those expectations, and then also just trusting your body. And this is a tough one,
Mm,
but literally, like, pregnancy is a passive experience. Like you don't do anything. Your body knows what to do. And even labor, it's a super passive
mhm.
um, just event until the very end when you're pushing. So yeah, your body does know what to do. And as an athlete, it's kind of hard to think about like relinquishing control, but you have to just like trust the process. And really, you're along for the ride, and some days are good, some days are not good, and there's nothing you can do about it. So the sooner you just like accept that, and just that's your present, I think the better it is. And then the third thing is, and this, we could go in on another podcast for this, but like the activity, how hard can you go? How easy do how long can you run or bike? Like what's safe? I think that again is individual, but you have to just like really tune into your body and be honest with yourself. And like,
Mhm.
what is the purpose of a 3-hour run when you're pregnant? And I just don't, if that works and it feels great, good. But I just think a lot of times that's not the best for a pregnant athlete to be trying to stay fit,
Mm.
getting out and like, maybe doing some intervals or going for a longish run, that can be a really, I think, healthy part of a pregnancy. But everything should come back to the intention of like, okay, so why are you doing this? And what's your primary goal? And it should be like, keeping your body healthy and safe. And that does include being active. I don't think we need to be afraid to
Mm.
push ourselves. Um, there's not much out there about doing intensity as you're pregnant, but, and again, everyone's different, but I felt that when I was doing harder work, whether it be on a bike or, hiking uphill after a while was hard work, I felt really good. And so just knowing that you have to kind of trust your body and just be honest with when things feel like too much or when you feel like you can go a little harder. And that's like a whole thing, like a whole can of worms that um, we don't know. Like the doctors don't know. So trusting your body a little
Right.
bit. And with
Right.
nutrition, eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full,
Yeah.
knowing that you don't have to eat for two, but you do need to eat a little bit more. That'll just help, when you give birth for your body to feel back to normal much quicker.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, maybe actually we should have a follow-up podcast with all the things that you've learned from, from
Well,
yourself over and yeah.
yeah, and we could make it really scientific too, looking at the literature that's out there on
Right.
pregnancy and, what is safe. But I think, I just think talking to someone other than just a doctor, and I don't want
Mhm.
to, I think talking to your doctor is important, but I think sometimes they don't know everything there is to know about exercise and intensity. And especially when you're an athlete and your body is used to that.
Mhm.
If someone is sedentary and they're talking about like going for, or I shouldn't say sedentary, but someone who's like does a low level of activity, that's going to be different for them going for an hour every day than someone like, who trains 20 hours a week. If they drop that down to like 50% of that, that's still 10 hours a week.
Yeah.
And that to them, that's probably appropriate. But when you get that out of context, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you doing? Are you taking care of the baby? And there's a lot of stigma around that.
Right. Yeah. But oh man, thank you so much, Stephanie, for speaking with us today. I think we touched about on a lot of great topics, and yeah, I just encourage the listeners to comment, ask questions, continue the conversation, and yeah, I think we can all learn from one another and yeah, support everyone in this sport of ultra running. So thanks so much, Steph, for taking the
Yeah.
time.
Thanks for
Yeah,
having me on. This was a great conversation. And yeah, I'm happy to talk more if anyone has specific questions or wants to reach out.
awesome.